She thought she had it all. The man, the money, the first-class ticket to paradise. But when Amber sauntered onto the gleaming private jet, she found one obstacle: the quiet wife of her lover. What starts as a power play at 40,000 feet becomes the most devastating humiliation of her life. She was about to learn that the woman she dismissed as nothing didn't just have a seat on the plane. She owned the entire airline. This is the story of how a mistress's arrogance led to her ultimate downfall. The air at the Teterboro private lounge hummed with a different kind of silence. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the muffling of it by deep pile carpets, plush velvet upholstery, and the unspoken understanding that everyone present was wealthy enough not to speak above a polite murmur. Amber, however, had never been good with polite murmurs. She checked her reflection in the gold leaf mirror, adjusting the strap of her crimson Prada dress. Her blonde hair, the product of a 6-hour salon visit, cascaded over her shoulders. She was, in a word, immaculate, a predator draped in luxury. Her phone buzzed. A text from Gregory. "Just landed. Walking over. You better be ready." A slow, satisfied smile spread across her face. Ready. She'd been ready for this her entire life. Gregory Fordham was her ticket, not just to this lounge or the waiting Gulfstream G700 outside, but to everything. He was a titan of finance, a shark in a Zegna suit, and he was, for all intents and purposes, hers. She picked up her Chanel bag and walked toward the discreet door leading to the tarmac. A lounge attendant, all smiles and deference, opened it for her. "Mr. Fordham's flight is this way, Miss Vaughan." Amber sniffed the air. It smelled of jet fuel and money. Oh, the plane was magnificent, a gleaming white spear with a dark blue stripe and the stylized zesta of the Zenith Charter Group on the tail. This was Gregory's preferred airline, the most exclusive charter service in the world, dwarfing competitors like NetJets or FlexJet in sheer luxury. As she approached the steps, she saw the flight attendant at the door, Brenda, a woman with a perfectly coiffed bun and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. But Brenda wasn't looking at her. She was looking past her, at someone else who had just emerged from the lounge. Amber turned, and her perfect day soured. It was her, Helen Fordham, the wife. Amber's lip curled in a micro sneer she quickly hid. She had only seen photos of Helen, and they were universally unflattering. The reality was somehow worse. While Amber was a blaze of crimson and gold, Helen was a study in beige. She wore a simple, oatmeal-coloured cashmere cardigan, grey slacks that were functional rather than fashionable, and sensible-looking loafers. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple, severe bun, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked less like the wife of a billionaire and more like his moderately paid accountant. Helen was carrying her own small, rolling suitcase, struggling slightly with the wheel as it caught on the tarmac. He brought her? Amber's mind reeled. He's bringing his dowdy little wife on our trip. This was supposed to be their anniversary, the anniversary of the day they'd met, while Helen was presumably at some pathetic charity luncheon. Rage, hot and sharp, flared in Amber's chest. But then, a new, delicious thought replaced it. This wasn't a problem. This was an opportunity, a chance to establish, once and for all, who the real woman in Gregory's life was. Amber glided forward, her heels clicking decisively. She stopped directly in front of Helen, forcing the older woman to halt. "Helen, isn't it?" Amber said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. She didn't offer a hand. Helen looked up, her eyes, a surprisingly clear, steady blue, meeting Amber's. "Yes, and you are Amber." It wasn't a question. "I am," Amber beamed, making a show of looking her up and down. "Oh, goodness! Did Gregory forget to tell you where you were going? We're headed to Mustique. It's very warm. That cardigan might be a bit much." Helen's expression didn't flicker. "I'll manage." "I'm just so surprised to see you," Amber continued, loud enough for the flight attendant to hear. "I thought you were more, I don't know, the stay-at-home and knit type. But good for you, getting out. It's so important for people in your position to see the world." She was baiting her, insulting her, calling her a charity case. The wife was just baggage Gregory was forced to tow along, and Amber was the main event. "It's kind of you to be so concerned with my comfort," Helen replied, her voice incredibly, frustratingly calm. She made a move to step around Amber. Amber blocked her path again, stepping closer, lowering her voice to a venomous whisper. "Let's get one thing clear, Beige. You might have the ring for now, but I have the man. You're a guest on my trip. Try to remember that. Sit in the back, read your little book, and don't get in the way. Maybe Gregory will throw you a souvenir." Amber felt a thrill of victory. She had drawn the battle lines. She watched Helen's face, waiting for the tears, the anger, the satisfying crack in her composure. Helen simply held her gaze for a long, silent moment. The sound of the jet's auxiliary power unit filled the void. "Are you quite finished?" Helen asked, as if inquiring about the weather. Before Amber could retort, a booming voice cut across the tarmac. "There you are." Gregory Fordham strode into view, all teeth and testosterone, his phone already pressed to his ear. "No, you tell Johnson if he can't close by Friday. The whole deal is dead. I don't care. Dead!" He clicked the phone off and shoved it into his pocket, his smile returning instantly as he looked at Amber. "You look like $1 billion, baby," he said, kissing her fully on the lips, a deliberately theatrical gesture for Helen's benefit. He then turned to his wife. The smile vanished. "Helen." It was a cold, flat acknowledgement. "You're here. Good. Get on the plane. Don't cause a scene." "Hello, Gregory," Helen said, her voice still impossibly neutral. "Come on, Amber," Gregory said, slinging an arm around her waist and guiding her toward the stairs, leaving Helen standing alone on the tarmac. Amber looked back over her shoulder and gave Helen a triumphant, pitying smirk. Helen, she noted, hadn't moved. She just watched them, her face unreadable. As Amber stepped into the cabin, the scent of fresh roses and rich leather hit her. "Brenda," she trilled at the flight attendant, "I'll have a glass of the good champagne before we even take off, and make sure my guest," she gestured back toward Helen, "has plenty of water. She looks a bit dehydrated." Brenda, the flight attendant, smiled that plastic smile. "Of course, Miss Vaughan." Amber settled into the plush cream leather seat, sinking into it with a sigh of pure bliss. This was her world, and Helen was just a ghost haunting it. The cabin of the Gulfstream G700 was less an aircraft interior and more a penthouse apartment that defied gravity. Polished walnut, cream leather, and brushed gold fixtures gleamed under the soft, adjustable lighting. Amber kicked off her Louboutins and stretched her legs, accepting the fluted glass of champagne from Brenda. Helen boarded moments later, quietly stowing her own small bag in the overhead compartment, a task Gregory didn't even bother to watch, as he was already on his satellite phone again, shouting at someone named Johnson. "Helen," Gregory barked, holding a hand over the receiver. "Sit, over there." He pointed to a single seat at the very back of the main cabin, near the galley and the lavatories. It was clearly the least desirable seat. Amber watched, sipping her champagne. This was perfect. The wife banished to the back. Helen, without a word of protest, walked to the back, sat down, and buckled her seatbelt. A moment later, she pulled a worn, dog-eared paperback from her handbag. "Pathetic," Amber muttered to Gregory, who had hung up his call. "What's that, baby?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Her. Sitting back there like a servant. Why did you even have to bring her? You said this was our trip." Amber pouted, running a manicured nail down his lapel. Gregory sighed, his eyes hard. "Shareholder business, Amber. Annoying but necessary. There's a spousal retreat on Mystique I'm supposed to attend with her for one of my bigger investors. She's just paperwork, a prop. The real trip," he said, kissing her neck, "is with you. You're the one in the master suite. She's in the guest cottage, if she's lucky." This mollified Amber. A prop. She liked that. She was the star. Helen was the background extra. The engine spooled up, and the G700 accelerated down the runway with a powerful, smooth surge. Within minutes they were airborne, climbing above the grey haze of New Jersey. Once they reached cruising altitude, the performance began. Amber was determined to make the next 5 hours as uncomfortable for Helen as possible, and as validating for herself as she could. She laughed loudly at Gregory's jokes. She fed him a chocolate-covered strawberry from the exquisite platter Brenda served. She draped her legs over his lap, whispering in his ear and kissing him deeply, all while knowing Helen was just a few rows back. She decided to take a series of selfies. She angled her phone, capturing the luxurious cabin, the champagne, and Gregory's adoring gaze. In one shot, she deliberately angled it to catch the background. There, just visible in the frame, was Helen, a blur of beige, engrossed in her book. Amber typed out a caption for her private Instagram story, reserved for her closest frenemies. "Finally heading to paradise with my man. Had to bring the excess baggage, LOL. Some people just don't know when their time is up." Winning. First class life. She hit send, feeling a rush of adrenaline. About an hour into the flight, Gregory fell asleep, his head tilted back, snoring softly. The cabin grew quiet, save for the hum of the engines. Amber was bored. She unbuckled and decided to stretch her legs and pay the prop a little visit. She sauntered to the back of the plane, pretending to be heading for the lavatory. Helen didn't look up from her book. "Enjoying the flight?" Amber asked, leaning against the bulkhead. Helen finished her page, then slowly looked up. "It's very smooth." "Zenith is the best," Amber said brightly. "Gregory, of course, only flies the best. He's one of their biggest clients. They treat him like royalty. We," she corrected herself, "get anything we want." Helen's gaze was unsettling. It wasn't fearful or angry. It was analytical, as if Amber were a bug under a microscope. "That must be very convenient for you," Helen finally said. "Oh, it is," Amber purred. "It's amazing what men will do for women they're actually passionate about. All this," she gestured around the cabin. "This is what real love looks like. Not whatever it is you have. A piece of paper? A shared Christmas card list? It's so quaint." Amber was trying to get a rise out of her, a single tear, a tremor in her voice. Anything. Helen just bookmarked her page. "Are you insecure, Amber?" Amber physically recoiled. "What? I have everything. Look at me. Look at you. Who on this plane looks insecure?" "People who are secure don't need to announce that they're winning," Helen said, her voice still quiet, but with a new, sharp edge that hadn't been there on the tarmac. "They just win. You seem to be working very hard to convince yourself of something." Amber's face flushed with anger. "You pathetic, dried up. You think you're wise? You're a joke. You're a doormat. Gregory is wiping his feet on you, and you're just sitting there, reading a book. And you are, what exactly? The new expensive welcome mat? Be careful, dear. Mats get replaced when they get dirty." "I am the future," Amber hissed, losing her composure, her voice rising above the engine hum. I'm the one he's building a life with. You're just the past he's too lazy to file for divorce from." The sleeping Gregory stirred at the front of the cabin. "Amber, what's going on back there?" Amber shot a look of pure hatred at Helen, then composed herself, strutting back to her seat. "Nothing, darling. Just getting a drink. The guest was just sleeping." She sat down, fuming. The little beige mouse had claws. The audacity of her! Amber stewed in her seat, her victory on the tarmac now feeling hollow. She needed to regain control. She needed to prove, to Helen and to Gregory, who was really in charge, and she knew just how to do it. For the next 2 hours, Amber sulked. She drank 2 more glasses of champagne, the bubbles doing little to soothe the simmering indignation. The nerve of that woman! "Mats get replaced." Amber watched the crew. There were 2 attendants in the main cabin, Brenda and a younger man named Leo. They were ghosts in sharp uniforms, efficient, polite, and invisible. They refilled Amber's glass without being asked. They brought Gregory a warm towel the moment he woke up. They were, in short, perfect service staff. But Amber started to notice something. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in their behavior. When Amber had snapped her fingers for a refill, a habit she'd picked up, believing it made her look commanding, Brenda's smile had tightened for a fraction of a second before she'd complied. "Right away, Ms. Vaughan." When Gregory had tossed his used napkin onto the floor, Leo had picked it up with a smile, but his eyes were flat. Their deference was professional, but it felt brittle, strained. Then Amber watched as Brenda approached Helen's seat in the back. Amber had to crane her neck to see. Brenda leaned down, not with the efficient, curt posture she used for Amber, but with a genuine, gentle incline. "Ms. H," Brenda said, her voice too low for Amber to hear the words, but the tone was entirely different. It was soft, respectful. Amber saw Helen smile, a small, genuine smile, and nod, gesturing to her empty water glass. Brenda returned a moment later, not with a standard plastic bottle, but with a tall glass of what looked like sparkling water with a twist of lime, served on a small, linen-wrapped tray. Amber's eyes narrowed. "Miss H? What kind of nickname was that?" It sounded familiar. Familiar and deferential. Not the kind of pitying nickname you give the sad wife. It sounded like respect. Amber dismissed it. They probably just feel sorry for her. The poor, cheated-on wife. They're giving her the pity treatment. The thought made her feel superior again. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Gregory was back on his phone, his voice tense. "I don't care what the margin call is. Move the funds from the Singapore account. Just handle it, damn it." He looked stressed, dark circles under his eyes that his tan couldn't hide. "Trouble in paradise, darling?" Amber asked, running her foot up his leg. "Nothing you need to worry about, baby," he said, patting her knee distractedly. "Just market fluctuations." He didn't seem like the confident shark she'd met. He seemed desperate. Amber turned her attention back to the cabin crew. She decided to test a theory. She pressed the call button. Leo appeared instantly. "Yes, Miss Vaughan?" "I'm cold," Amber announced. "The air is too high. Turn it up." "Certainly, Miss Vaughan. I'll adjust the cabin temperature immediately." He disappeared toward the cockpit. A few minutes later, Amber didn't feel any warmer. If anything, the air felt a tiny bit cooler. She fumed. She was being ignored. She pressed the button again, harder this time. Brenda appeared. "Is there a problem, Miss Vaughan?" "I told him," Amber snapped, "that I am cold. It's freezing in here. I want a blanket, a thick one, and I want the heat turned up. Now." Brenda's professional smile remained plastered on. "Miss Vaughan, The cabin temperature is set for optimal comfort. I'd be happy to bring you a pashmina. I don't want a pashmina. I want the heat turned up. I'm afraid any significant change to the cabin temperature requires me to check with all our guests first, as it can affect cabin pressure and comfort, Brenda said smoothly. Then check. Amber gestured to Gregory, who was rubbing his temples, and then back to Helen. It's just us. Go ask her. Brenda nodded. Thank you, Miss Vaughan. I will do just that. Brenda didn't walk to Gregory. She didn't walk to the thermostat. She walked directly to the back of the plane, to Helen's seat. Again, she leaned in. Amber watched intently. This was not the behavior of an attendant asking a prop for permission. This was the behavior of an attendant asking a host. Brenda spoke to Helen for a long moment. Helen listened, then shook her head, saying something brief in reply. Brenda returned to Amber's seat. Her smile was still in place, but it looked like it had been carved from ice. My apologies, Miss Vaughan, Brenda said, her voice crisp. We are unable to adjust the cabin temperature at this time. However, she produced a thick cashmere throw, the color of clotted cream. I have this for you. It's brand new. Amber snatched the blanket. This is ridiculous. Gregory, are you hearing this? They're refusing to turn up the heat. Gregory, deep in a financial report on his laptop, just waved a hand. Just take the blanket, Amber. Stop making a fuss. Amber shrank back, humiliated. Stop making a fuss? He was taking their side over hers? Over the heat? She wrapped the blanket around herself, her face burning with a mixture of anger and a new, unfamiliar feeling. Confusion. Something was wrong. The dynamic was off. The staff was being polite, but they were defying her. And they were, in some strange, unspoken way, reporting to the beige mouse in the back. Amber looked back again. Helen had put her book down. She was staring out the window at the endless blue of the Atlantic. Her profile was calm, strong, and completely untroubled. For the first time, Amber felt a genuine prickle of fear. She'd assumed she was the queen in this equation. But what if she had fundamentally misunderstood the entire game? The incident with the thermostat left a bitter taste in Amber's mouth. She felt a desperate need to reassert her dominance, to prove that her initial assessment was correct. She was the A-plot. Helen was the B-plot. She needed a grand gesture, a display of power that the crew, and Helen, could not mistake. She remembered Gregory boasting about the Zenith Charter Group's wine cellar. He'd claimed they could source anything for their top clients, even mid-flight. "Brenda!" Amber called, her voice sharp. Brenda, who was clearing Gregory's empty coffee cup, turned. "Yes, Miss Vaughan. I've decided I want to celebrate. We're almost to Mustik. Gregory, darling," she cooed. "We should have a proper toast." Gregory, who had just closed his laptop with a stressed sigh, looked grateful for the distraction. "Good idea, baby. Whatever you want." Amber turned back to Brenda, a sly, victorious smile on her face. "I want the 1998 Dom Perignon Rosé Gold. I know you have it. Gregory has had it on this plane before." This was her checkmate. The 98 Rosé Gold was a legendary, ultra-rare vintage, costing tens of thousands of dollars a bottle. Ordering it was not a request. It was a declaration of status. It was the kind of thing only a king like Gregory could command. Brenda's professional smile didn't just tighten. It vanished. For a split second, she looked startled. Then the mask was back. "The 1998 Dom Perignon Rosé Gold," Brenda repeated slowly, as if committing it to memory. "An excellent choice, Miss Vaughan. Please, wait one moment." She disappeared into the galley. Amber sat back, her smirk returning. There. Let the mouse in the back hear that. She was already picturing the magnificent, gold-plated bottle, the pop of the cork, the look of envy on Helen's face. Gregory seemed to relax. Now that's what I'm talking about. Good call, Amber. A minute passed. Then 2. Amber's smirk began to fade. What was taking so long? Was she arguing with the pilot about it? Brenda re-emerged from the galley. She was empty-handed. Miss Vaughan, Brenda began, her voice a low, formal monotone. I'm afraid the 1998 Dom Perignon Rosé Gold is not available for service. Amber's blood ran cold, then hot. Not available? What do you mean, not available? I just told you. Gregory has it all the time. My apologies, but that specific bottle is part of a private manifest. It is allocated. Allocated? Allocated to who? Amber demanded, her voice rising to a shriek. We are the only passengers. Are you telling me the pilots are drinking it? Gregory, seeing his prize and his status slipping away, sat up straight. His titan of industry voice returned. Now listen here, Brenda. I am paying over $100,000 for this flight. If my guest wants that champagne, she gets that champagne. I don't care what manifest it's on. Go and get it. That's an order. He said it with a finality that usually made assistants and subordinates scurry. Brenda didn't scurry. She stood her ground, her hands clasped in front of her. Sir, she said, addressing Gregory directly, her voice respectful but iron firm. I cannot. That bottle was provisioned by special request by the owner. It is not part of the standard client cellar. It is from the owner's personal stock, and it is reserved. Amber burst into a high, hysterical laugh. The owner? You think the owner is on this flight? What is he hiding in the cockpit? Gregory looked furious. This is an outrage. I am Gregory Fordham. I spend millions with this company. I am your owner, for all intents and purposes. Who the hell is on this plane more important than me? Brenda's gaze was steady. She didn't flinch. I am very sorry, Mr. Fordham, but my instructions are clear. The owner's private stock is not available. This is the worst service I have ever had, Amber yelled, slamming her hand on the armrest. I'm going to have you fired. I'm going to tell Gregory to buy this entire pathetic airline and fire every single one of you. Amber, shut up, Gregory snapped, his face pale. He knew he'd been rebuffed, and it made him look weak. He turned back to Brenda. This is unacceptable. Get your manager. I am the lead flight coordinator, sir. There is no one else to speak to, Brenda said. I can offer you our Dom Perignon 2012, which is also excellent. I don't want the 2012, Amber cried, her face blotchy with rage. I want the 98. I want what I asked for. And you can't have it. The voice was not Brenda's. It was quiet. It was clear. And it came from the back of the plane. Amber, Gregory, and Brenda all turned. Helen Fordham had put her book down in her lap. She was looking at them, her expression no longer passive or analytical. It was one of mild annoyance, as if they were toddlers throwing a tantrum. What did you say? Amber whispered, her throat suddenly dry. Helen unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up. And for the first time, Amber noticed she wasn't dowdy. The cashmere, she now saw, was Loro Piana. The simple loafers were handcrafted by Brunello Cucinelli. The beige outfit probably cost more than Amber's entire crimson ensemble. Helen walked slowly up the aisle, her movements fluid and sure-footed, despite the slight hum of the aircraft. She stopped next to Brenda, standing shoulder to shoulder with the flight attendant. She looked at Amber, then at her husband. I said, Helen repeated, her voice perfectly modulated, you can't have it. Because, as Brenda correctly stated, it's mine. The silence in the cabin was absolute, broken only by the faint whistle of air passing over the wings. Gregory stared, his mouth slightly open. "Helen, what? What are you talking about? It's yours? Did you steal it from the galley?" Amber let out a choked sound, a cross between a laugh and a gasp. "Oh my God! Are you a klepto? You're stealing champagne now. This is a new low, even for you." Helen simply raised an eyebrow. She didn't look at Amber. She didn't even look at Gregory. She looked at Brenda. "Brenda," Helen said, her voice warm, "you've handled this beautifully. But I believe you can stop referring to me as Ms. H now. It was a lovely code. But I think the game is up." Brenda's icy, professional mask melted away, replaced by a look of profound, genuine respect. "Yes, Mrs. Fordham. My apologies. I was just trying to maintain protocol as you requested." "You did perfectly," Helen said. She then turned her steady, blue-eyed gaze back to her husband. "Gregory," she said, and the name sounded new on her tongue. It wasn't the whisper of a wife. It was the sharp, clear pronouncement of a CEO. "You've been flying with Zenith Charter Group for 3 years. You've spent, as you correctly noted, millions of dollars. And in all that time, you never once bothered to ask what the Z stood for? Or the H in our parent company, H Group Global?" Gregory's face was ashen. "What? What are you talking about?" "H Group. That's holdings. H Group Holdings." "No, Gregory," Helen said softly. "It's not. H Group was founded by my mother, Helena. And Zenith? That was my pet project. My father always loved the stars. The zenith is the highest point. I founded this airline 10 years ago, before I even met you, as a small tribute to him." She ran a hand along the polished walnut bulkhead. "I designed this very interior. I chose the leather. I selected the routes, and I personally curate the owner's private wine list." She looked at Amber, whose own face had gone from crimson rage to a waxy chalk white. "The 1998 Dom Perignon Rosé Gold," Helen said, "was a gift from my father the day we secured our first G5. There is exactly 1 bottle on this plane, and I assure you, you are not drinking it." Amber sank back into her seat, her entire body numb. No, that's not possible. You're nothing. You're a housewife. You go to garden clubs." "Yes," Helen agreed. "I do. I am the head of the New York Botanical Gardens Endowment Fund. I'm also on the board of the Met, and I am the sole 100% owner of Zenith Charter Group and its parent company, H Group Global, which, among other things, owns the building your office is in, Gregory." Gregory finally found his voice. It was a strangled whisper. Helen, why? Why didn't I know? You always said you were just in philanthropy." "You never asked," Helen said, a deep, profound sadness entering her voice for the first time. "You met me at a charity ball. You saw my quiet clothes. You saw my family's old name, and you assumed I was just old money. You assumed I was a relic, a simple, quiet prop you could use to look respectable, while you behaved like this." She gestured from Amber to Gregory. Gregory was sputtering, his mind visibly racing, trying to recalculate decades of assumptions. "Helen, baby, listen to me. This, he gestured wildly at Amber. "This is nothing. This is a mistake, a diversion. You're my wife. I love you." Amber felt like she'd been slapped. "What? Gregory, you told me I was your life. You told me she was the mistake." Gregory ignored her, his eyes fixed on Helen, his face a mask of sweating, desperate panic. "Helen, please. We can sort this out. When we land, we'll send her," he spat the word, "back. We'll go to the resort. Just us. We'll talk." Helen watched him grovel. The shark had become a minnow, flopping on the deck. "No, Gregory, I don't think we will," Helen said. "You see, I've known about Amber for 6 months. I've known about the Singapore accounts for a year. I've known about the margin calls and the fact that you've been desperately and illegally trying to leverage my personal assets you still don't have access to cover your own catastrophic business failures." She walked over to the galley. Brenda, anticipating, had the 98 rosé gold waiting. It was, as Amber had noted, in a stunning gold-plated bottle. Helen took a clean flute from Brenda. "Thank you, Brenda. I think I will have that glass now." Brenda smiled. "My pleasure, Madame Chairman." Helen turned back to the frozen duo. The pop of the cork was the loudest sound Amber had ever heard. Helen poured a glass of the pale, bubbling pink champagne. "You see, Gregory," Helen said, taking a delicate sip, "this trip was shareholder business. I am the main shareholder of your company, or I was. As of 9 a.m. this morning, my board invoked the morality clause in your contract and voted for your removal. The spousal retreat on Mustique was a fiction, a way to get you and your excess baggage on my plane in international airspace where you couldn't cause a scene." She looked at Amber. "You're right about one thing. You are on this trip as a witness." Gregory Fordham's face went through a rapid, grotesque series of transformations, from ashen panic to purple rage, and finally to a sickly, defeated green. You can't," he stammered, his bravado utterly shattered. My company? I built that from nothing." "You built it," Helen corrected, "with a $50 million seed loan from H Group Global, a loan which, I might add, is now in default. You haven't built anything in a decade, Gregory. You've just been spending on parties, on apartments you don't own, on her." Amber, who had been frozen in a state of shock, suddenly found her voice. It was high and thin. "Me? What about me? Gregory, tell her you love me. Tell her she's lying." Gregory didn't even look at her. His entire universe had collapsed, and his eyes were fixed on the only person who mattered, his wife. "Helen, please," he begged, actually getting up from his seat and moving to kneel in the aisle beside her. "Helen, I'm so sorry. I was a fool, a blind, arrogant fool. You are everything. She's a cheap, gold-digging. She means nothing. I'll end it. Right now. I'll tell her to get off the plane. We can fix this. I can fix this." Amber felt the last of the air leave her lungs. She was the one being thrown away. She was the excess baggage. "Get off me, Gregory," Helen said, stepping back from his grasping hands with revulsion. "It's too late for that. It's been too late for a very long time. Did you really think I was that quiet? That simple? That dowdy?" She was using Amber's insults. "I let you think that," Helen continued, her voice like ice. "I let you think I was happily knitting and gardening while you played the big, important man. It was a test of your character. And you have failed, Gregory. You haven't just failed. You have failed so spectacularly that you will be a case study in business schools for decades." She took another sip of her champagne. "While you were buying Prada," she glanced at Amber's dress, "and leveraging company assets for your little side piece, I was quietly moving. Every asset you thought you had access to was systematically insulated. The accounts you've been draining, they were decoys I set up 6 months ago, filled with just enough money to keep you busy and to provide a very clear, very damning paper trail of embezzlement for the SEC. The real money, my father's money, my mother's money, has been in a blind trust since the day we married. A trust, I might add, that you have no legal claim to, especially not after, well, all of this. Gregory had crawled back to his seat. He was breathing heavily. You trapped me." "No," Helen said. "You built the cage, Gregory. I just let you lock yourself inside it." Suddenly, Amber, in a fit of pure, unadulterated panic, realized her own position. Her billionaire boyfriend wasn't just not a billionaire. He was broke. He was a criminal. And she had just spent 5 hours insulting the actual billionaire. "Wait! Wait!" Amber shrieked, scrambling up. This isn't my fault. He told me you were nothing. He lied to me. I'm a victim here too." She looked at Helen, her eyes wide with desperation. "Please, I didn't know. I would never. I mean, you're amazing. What you did, it's genius. We should be friends." Helen looked at Amber, and for the first time, Amber saw what she had mistaken for quiet and beige. It wasn't weakness. It was a stillness, a deep, cold, and absolute power. "Friends?" Helen replied, a small, mirthless smile playing on her lips. "I don't think so. You're not a victim, Amber. You're a co-conspirator. You knew he was a married man. You gleefully participated in his humiliation of me. You drank his champagne, you wore his clothes, and you sat in my plane, insulting me. You didn't care about the right or wrong of it. You only cared that you were winning. And now you've lost." The intercom crackled. It wasn't the pilot's voice. It was Brenda's. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our initial descent. However, there has been a change in our flight plan. We will not be landing in Mustique. We will be landing at Westchester County Airport in White Plains, New York. We will be on the ground in approximately 20 minutes. Amber's head snapped to the window. The endless blue ocean was gone. Below them, shrouded in the late afternoon haze, was the distinct shoreline of the Long Island Sound. They weren't in the Caribbean. They had just flown in a large, pointless circle. "What? New York?" Amber shrieked. "We're back in New York. We didn't go anywhere." "Oh, we went somewhere," Helen said, returning to her seat, her original seat in the back. "We flew out over international waters, far enough for my legal team to file the injunctions, freeze your accounts, and remove you from the company board without you being able to interfere. And now, we're home." Gregory was rocking back and forth, muttering to himself. "My office, the building, oh God, the funds, Johnson. I have to call Johnson." He fumbled for his satellite phone. "I wouldn't bother," Helen called from the back. "Mr. Johnson has been cooperating with my forensic accounting team for 3 weeks. He's the one who gave us the final piece of evidence. He's probably signing a witness protection agreement as we speak." Gregory's hand froze. He looked at the phone in his hand as if it were a snake. His entire world, his empire, his mistress, his wife, all of it, had been an illusion, orchestrated by the one person he had never, ever taken seriously. The descent was heavy with a silence, thicker than the clouds they were passing through. The luxurious cabin, which had so recently been Amber's stage for triumph, had become a soundproofed tomb. Every faint creak of the fuselage, every subtle shift in the engine's whine, felt magnified, echoing in the dead air between the 3 passengers. Amber sat rigid, her hands clamped so tightly on the cream leather armrests that her knuckles were white. Her gaze was fixed on the bulkhead in front of her, but she saw nothing. Her mind was a frantic blur of calculations, a desperate search for an angle, an escape, a way to rewind time. but there was none. She was trapped at 40,000 feet with the woman she had mocked and the man who had just proven to be a hollow shell. Gregory was in a worse state. He was completely catatonic. His face, which had cycled through panic and rage, had settled into a mask of waxy, sweaty ruin. He stared at his own reflection in the polished walnut table, his breathing shallow. He was a man who had been playing chess, only to find out his opponent was playing a different game entirely, one she had already won before he even sat down. And in the back, Helen had resumed reading her paperback book. The sight of it was the most terrifying thing Amber had ever witnessed. She was calmly turning pages, as if she were on a commuter train, not concluding a hostile takeover of her husband's life in mid-air. The Gulfstream G700 touched down on the runway at Westchester County Airport with a barely perceptible bump. The landing was, as always, impossibly smooth, but the thud of the wheels on the tarmac felt like a gavel striking, a final judgment. They weren't in Mustique. They weren't in paradise. They were back in New York on a grey, overcast afternoon. The plane didn't taxi to the sleek, glass-walled private terminal where Amber had boarded, a place humming with quiet prestige and waiting limousines. Instead, it rolled, and kept rolling, to a remote, isolated part of the airfield. Amber finally forced her head to turn to the window. She saw no plush lounges, only a chain-link fence, a small, featureless utility building, and a vast, empty stretch of grey concrete. The engine spooled down. The sudden, encompassing silence was louder than any of Gregory's rants had been. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off. "Thank you for flying Zenith Charter Group." Brenda's voice came over the intercom, her tone once again bright and professional, as if this were the most normal flight in the world. "The local time is 4:52 p.m. Please remain seated until the cabin door is open." In the back, Helen placed her bookmark, a simple leather strip, into her book and closed it. She stood, smoothing her Loro Piana cardigan, her movements fluid and unhurried. She picked up her small, simple handbag. Amber finally realized the truth. Helen hadn't been struggling with a rolling suitcase on the tarmac. She'd been pretending to. The bag had been a prop, a piece of her dowdy wife costume, likely left in the lounge. The cabin door opened. The cold, damp air of a New York autumn afternoon rushed in, displacing the climate-controlled luxury. It didn't reveal a red carpet. It revealed a set of stark, metal stairs, the grey tarmac, and two men in dark, conservative suits. They looked like lawyers, or perhaps something more. They were not smiling. Standing a few feet behind them, his presence an unstated threat, was a uniformed officer from the Westchester County Police. Helen walked to the front of the plane. She passed Gregory's seat. He didn't look up, not even when her shadow fell across him. She paused at Amber's row. Amber looked up, her face a ruin. Her perfectly applied makeup was now a blotchy, tear-streaked mess. Her crimson dress felt garish and cheap. What's going to happen to me?" Amber whispered, the words catching in her dry throat. It was the plea of a child, a final, desperate appeal to the very woman she had tried to destroy. Helen looked down at her. Her expression was not one of anger or even triumph. It was one of cool, detached pity, the look one might give a particularly foolish insect. "That, Amber, is no longer my concern," Helen said, her voice quiet, but carrying utter finality. "You saw this as a game of winning, and you attached yourself to the man you thought was the winner. You hitched your wagon to a falling star. My advice, for what it's worth? Next time, you should have brought your own parachute." She then turned to Gregory. "Gregory." He flinched, a small, pathetic motion. He finally looked at her, his eyes hollow and pleading. My lawyers will be serving you at... Well, I suppose they'll serve you at the police station. They will be handling the divorce and the criminal complaint for embezzlement and wire fraud. I have been advised, for legal reasons, not to speak to you again. Goodbye." Helen turned and walked to the open door, a picture of calm control. She nodded to the men in suits who parted for her like the sea. "Ms. H," one of them said, his voice low and respectful. "The car is ready." "Thank you, Robert," she replied. She walked down the steps, her sensible loafers making a soft, firm sound on the metal. She never once looked back. A black, unassuming Mercedes S-Class, a car that, unlike Amber's rented Ferraris, whispered power rather than screaming for attention, pulled up. Robert opened the door for her. She got in, and the car drove away, disappearing around the side of a hangar. Back on the plane, the two men in suits boarded, their large frames filling the doorway, blocking the light. The uniformed officer remained at the bottom of the steps. "Mr. Gregory Fordham?" the taller one asked. It was not a question. Gregory just nodded, a broken man, his head sinking to his chest. "You need to come with us. We have a warrant for your arrest on several counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. Please stand." Gregory stood, but he seemed to be moving through water. He was stumbling, his legs weak. The officer stepped up into the cabin, holding a pair of handcuffs. Amber watched, frozen, as the officer instructed Gregory to turn around. The man she had called her Titan, her king, the shark she had so admired, put his hands behind his back without a word. The sharp, metallic, click, click, click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the only sound. They led him down the aisle, his expensive Xenia suit now hopelessly rumpled, his head bowed in utter defeat. And then he was gone. Amber was alone in the cabin with Brenda. The silence stretched. Brenda began to walk through the cabin, collecting the empty champagne flutes, her expression perfectly neutral. "Well," Amber said, her voice shaking as she tried to muster a final shred of dignity. I guess I'll just call an Uber." She reached for her phone, a desperate lunge for her last connection to the world. Brenda stopped her tidying and looked at her. Her professional smile was gone, and her eyes were as cold and grey as the tarmac outside. "I'm afraid not, Miss Vaughan," Brenda said, her voice stripped of all pretense of service. "Your name was on the flight manifest as a guest of Mr. Fordham. As he has just been arrested, and his account with Zenith Charter Group is permanently closed, effective immediately. You are now considered an unauthorized passenger." An unauthorized passenger," Amber repeated, the words feeling like a slap. "But I have to get home. You can't just leave me here." "I'm sure you do," Brenda said, "but you will not be leaving through the private terminal. That access is reserved for our clients. You'll be escorted by airport security through the main TSA checkpoint. From there, you're on your own." Brenda gestured to the open door, where a different, disgruntled-looking airport security guard was now waiting. Expulsion. This was the final humiliation. She wasn't just being kicked out of the plane, she was being kicked out of the world she had tried so hard to infiltrate. Amber looked around the cabin one last time, at the polished walnut, the plush seats, the empty flutes. This had been her dream, her golden cage, and the door had just been slammed shut, with her on the wrong side. Numbly, she picked up her Chanel bag, her only remaining prize. It suddenly felt heavy, a gaudy-looking prop from a play that had just ended. She walked, her head down, out of the aircraft, the cold air hitting her face. The security guard wordlessly pointed her toward a distant, staff-only door on the side of the main terminal. It was a long, humiliating walk across the open tarmac. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked at it, desperate for any lifeline, any friend. It was an alert from her Instagram. The story she had posted hours ago, the one of her and Gregory, the one calling Helen excess baggage, was suddenly, inexplicably, being flooded with comments. She didn't know how, but the story was out. OMG, do you know who his wife is? This aged so badly. LMAO, she owns the plane. Karma by Amber, a Zenith charter. Boss move. Her world had ended, not with a bang, but with the quiet, satisfied click of a car door as the quiet wife drove away. And just like that, the quiet wife showed that true power doesn't need to be loud. Helen walked away with her dignity, her company, and her freedom, while Amber and Gregory were left with nothing but the consequences of their own actions. What do you think of Helen's ultimate power move? Have you ever seen karma delivered so perfectly? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of justice and unexpected twists, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama every single week. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you in the next story. He was a man who had everything: a corner office on the 50th floor, a tailored suit worth more than most cars, and a ruthless ambition that had scorched everyone beneath him. His secretary Clara was just another rung on his ladder, diligent, intelligent, and inconveniently pregnant. When his ambitious mistress, Serafina, wanted Clara gone, he did it without a second thought. He fired her, publicly, humiliatingly. What he didn't know, as he watched her walk away, was that Clara wasn't just his secretary. She was Clara Hayes, the only daughter of the man who owned the entire building, and the reckoning was just beginning. Julian Vance lived his life 50 floors above New York City, and he believed this altitude granted him a kind of divinity. His office at Vanguard Equity Partners wasn't just a room, it was a testament to his arrival. It was a cube of glass, suspended over the city, and from it he viewed the world, and his employees, as tiny, manageable subjects. Julian was a man carved from ambition. At 38, he was the youngest senior vice president in the firm's history, and he wore his success like armor: bespoke Tom Ford suits, a Patek Philippe watch that chimed on the quarter hour, and a smile that was both dazzling and predatory. Outside that glass cube sat Clara Hayes. Clara was, in every way, the antithesis of Julian's flash. She was quiet, methodical, and possessed an intelligence that was as deep as it was unobtrusive. For 2 years, she had been the perfect secretary. She anticipated his needs, corrected his mistakes before he made them, and managed his chaotic schedule with an unnerving calm. She was, as Julian often bragged to his peers, a mind reader. But 6 months ago, Clara had become an inconvenience. She was pregnant. Her body, once neatly professional, was now undeniably round. Her presence, once efficient, now seemed to Julian to be a constant, ticking reminder of biological messiness. He loathed it. It wasn't just the impending maternity leave, a scheduling black hole, he'd called it. It was the visual of it. It screamed weakness. It screamed domesticity. It screamed everything Julian had sacrificed to get where he was. "Clara!" he barked through the intercom, not looking up from his terminal. "My 10 a.m. client notes. Now." "They're on your desk, Julian," her calm voice replied instantly. "I placed them there an hour ago. Open to page 3, where you'll find the discrepancies in their Q3 report." Julian glanced down. There they were. He grunted, annoyed at her preemptive competence. His annoyance was being actively stoked by Serafina Croft. Serafina was the firm's new head of strategic marketing, hired 3 months prior. She was fire to Clara's ice, all sharp angles, blood-red lipstick, and a laugh that echoed with undisguised avarice. She and Julian had fallen into a discreet, then flagrant affair almost immediately. Serafina didn't just want Julian's affection, she wanted his power, and she saw Clara as a stubborn obstacle. Serafina sauntered over to Clara's desk, leaning against it hip first, deliberately crowding Clara's space. She was holding a steaming mug. "Still here, Clara?" Serafina purred, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "I'm surprised you can still fit behind that desk. You're blooming." Clara didn't look up from her screen. "I'm fine, Miss Croft. Can I help you with something?" "Oh, just admiring your dedication," Serafina said, taking a sip. "Julian is so kind to let you keep working. Most women in your condition would be at home, nesting or something." A few junior analysts snickered. Clara's fingers paused on the keyboard. Beside her, Mary, the older executive assistant for another partner, shot Serafina a venomous look. Mary liked Clara. She'd seen ambitious sharks like Serafina devour good people for sport. "I'm more effective here, Miss Croft," Clara said evenly. "Are you, though?" Serafina shot back. Julian was just complaining that the Sanderson files were late. "Pregnancy brain, I suppose?" Clara's head snapped up. "The Sanderson files are not due until tomorrow at 5. Julian wanted them today. He must have forgotten to tell you," Serafina said, with a fake pout. "Don't worry, I handled it for him." Clara watched her walk away, a perfectly straight seam running up the back of her designer skirt. Clara looked at her digital scheduler. The Sanderson deadline was, indeed, tomorrow. Serafina was lying. She was building a narrative. This wasn't the first time. For weeks, Serafina had been helpfully pointing out Clara's lapses. A meeting missed that had been rescheduled by Serafina herself. A coffee order that was wrong, though Julian had changed his preference that morning. Small, insidious cuts designed to bleed Clara's reputation dry. And Julian, blinded by Serafina's ambition and his own, was letting it happen. Later that day, Julian had a crisis. A major client, the pension fund for the state of Ohio, was threatening to pull their $800 million portfolio. Their representative was on a conference call, and he was furious. "I'm looking at this proposal, Vance, and it's a joke," the man yelled through the speakerphone. "You've miscalculated our exposure by nearly 15%. This is amateur hour." Julian was sweating. He was shuffling papers, his charm failing. "Mr. Henderson, if you'll just let me explain." Clara, listening from her desk, quietly printed a single sheet of paper. She walked into the glass office, ignoring Serafina, who had perched herself on the guest chair, and slid the paper in front of Julian. On it were 3 bullet points. Julian paused. He read them. His posture changed. "Mr. Henderson," Julian said, his voice suddenly smooth as silk. "I haven't miscalculated. You're looking at the projections before we factored in the new federal bond acquisitions. If you'll turn to Appendix D, subsection 4A, which my team prepared this morning, you'll see we've actually shielded your exposure. The 15% discrepancy isn't a loss. It's a hedge that's already paying dividends." There was a silence on the line. "Well, why didn't you say so?" "I prefer to let the numbers speak for themselves," Julian said, leaning back. He won the call. The client was pacified. When he hung up, Serafina ran a hand up his arm. "You were brilliant, Julian. You saved us." Julian straightened his tie, his gaze falling on Clara, who was quietly retrieving the paper. "Clara, get the Henderson contingency file updated, and next time, try to keep up." Clara paused at the door, her back to him. "Of course, Julian." She walked out. Julian didn't see the look on her face, but Mary at the next desk did. It wasn't defeat, It wasn't sadness. It was a cold, calculating patience. It was the look of a chess master watching her opponent knowingly walk into a trap. The trap was being set, but not by Clara. It was being set by Julian and Serafina over $300 stakes at the Onyx Room, a restaurant so dark and exclusive it felt like a vault. "She has to go, Julian," Serafina said, swirling a glass of Cabernet. The crimson liquid caught the light from the single candle. "She makes you look soft." Julian loosened his tie, away from the fluorescent lights of the office. His ambition felt purer, more justified. "She's pregnant, Sarah. Firing her is a legal nightmare. The optics are terrible." "Optics?" Serafina laughed, a low, throaty sound. "We're not talking about optics. We're talking about your future, the partnership, the Asia-Pacific expansion. Do you think David Morrison got to be CEO by worrying about optics? He got there by being decisive, by cutting liabilities." She leaned in, her voice dropping. "And she is a liability. She's slow, she's dowdy, and she's watching us. I don't like it." Julian frowned. "She's a secretary. She's not watching anything." "Isn't she?" Serafina countered. "She saved you on that Henderson call. How did she know that? How was she that prepared? It's like she's auditing you. It's creepy, Julian. And frankly, I want her desk. I want to be right outside your office. I can be your partner in this, Julian. Your real partner. But not while she's there, playing Mother Superior." The image she painted was potent. Serafina, in her sharp suits, sitting guard at his door. Serafina, anticipating his real needs. It was an intoxicating thought. The pregnancy had repulsed him, but Serafina was right. Clara's quiet competence was, in its own way, a threat. It felt like judgment. "Fine," Julian said, his voice hardening. "We cut the liability, but it has to be clean. It has to be for cause." "Then we find a cause," Serafina smiled, raising her glass. The cause began the next day. It was a two-pronged attack: manufacture a performance issue and sabotage her reliability. The first step was a file. The North Star acquisition was Julian's flagship project, a $2 billion deal. The final signatory papers were due by courier to London by 10 a.m. Friday. This was a hard deadline. Missing it would incur massive penalties. Clara had the package prepped by Wednesday. She logged it for international courier pickup, triple-checked the customs forms, and placed the bright red, wax-sealed envelope in the secure outgoing mail slot. She sent a confirmation email to Julian. "North Star package is secure and logged for 8 a.m. pickup tomorrow, Thursday. It will arrive in London with 24 hours to spare." Julian read the email. Serafina was leaning over his shoulder. "See?" he whispered. "She's on top of it." "It's impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Serafina whispered back. She waited until 5:30 p.m., when Clara, moving a little slower than usual, packed her bag and headed for the elevator. Clara was the last to leave their section. Mary, the other assistant, had left hours ago. At 5:35 p.m., Serafina walked calmly to the mailroom. She flirted with the night shift clerk, asked him to find a lost earring near the sorting table. While he was distracted, her hand darted into the international secure slot. She retrieved the bright red envelope. She didn't destroy it. She simply slipped it into her oversized designer handbag. At 7 p.m., she and Julian were in his office. He was pacing. "This is insane, Sarah. This is a felony." "It's a clerical error, Julian," she cooed, placing the envelope on his desk. "Clara's error. She must have forgotten to put it in the slot. Look, here it is, sitting on her desk, buried under a memo. She must have left it this afternoon. How tragic. How forgetful." She then moved to Clara's computer. Clara, trusting, had her password saved in a desktop file for Julian, in case of emergency. This, Serafina decided, was an emergency. She logged into Clara's email. She found the confirmation message sent to Julian. North Star package is secure and logged. Serafina smiled, and with a click of the mouse, she deleted it. Not just from Clara's sent folder, but from the server-side recall. Then, she went into Clara's scheduler and deleted the courier pickup appointment. "There," she said, logging out. "No email, no appointment, just a package sitting on her desk. Missed. A multi-billion-dollar deal, jeopardized by her incompetence. By her pregnancy brain." Julian stared at the package. This was the point of no return. This wasn't just firing someone, it was destroying them. He picked up the package. He opened Clara's desk drawer, the one with her spare sweaters and prenatal vitamins, and dropped the package inside, kicking it to the very back. "It's done," he said, his voice hollow. "Good," Serafina said, kissing him hard. "Now tomorrow, we'll be in the Chicago office. We'll be unreachable. By the time anyone realizes the package never left, it will be Friday morning. It will be too late, and it will be entirely her fault." They left the office, partners in crime. Back in the darkness, the green light on Clara's computer terminal blinked off, but across the hall, a small red light on a ceiling-mounted security camera, the one Julian always assumed was just for show, remained on. It had captured Serafina's 5:35 p.m. visit to the mailroom. It had captured her logging into Clara's computer. It had captured everything. Friday morning was electric with panic. The first call came at 9 a.m., London time, which was 4 a.m. in New York. Julian, asleep in his high-rise apartment, ignored it. The second came at 5 a.m. from his boss, David Morrison. Julian answered that one. "Vance, where in God's name is the North Star package?" Morrison bellowed, his voice cracking with transatlantic static. "Our London team is sitting here with the board, and the documents are not here. The 10 a.m. deadline is in 1 hour. Julian feigned groggy confusion. "What? That's impossible." Clara confirmed it was sent. "Well, it wasn't," Morrison roared. "You fix this, Vance. You fix this now, or your partnership is dead." The line clicked. Julian was wide awake. He frantically called the office. Clara, who always arrived at 7 a.m., picked up. "Clara, where is the North Star package?" Julian yelled, genuine panic now mixing with his manufactured rage. "It's... what?" Clara's voice was instantly alert. "Julian, it's in London. I sent it Wednesday for Thursday pickup." "It's not in London. The courier company has no record of a pickup. Did you log it?" "Yes, of course I logged it. I emailed you the confirmation." Clara was typing furiously. "Julian, the email. It's gone. The scheduler appointment. It's not here." "What do you mean it's not there?" Julian spat. "Did you forget? Clara, did you forget to send the most important package of my career?" "No, Clara was stunned. She was searching her desk, her mind racing. I don't understand. I know Find it, Clara. Find it, or you are finished." Julian hung up. He showered, shaved, and dressed with methodical care. He put on his most expensive suit. Today was a day for an execution. He arrived at the office at 9 a.m. sharp. The floor was a morgue. Everyone knew. The North Star deal was dead. The firm would face millions in penalties, but worse, the reputational damage was catastrophic. Clara was pale, standing by her desk, her hands resting on her stomach. She looked defeated. "My office, Clara." "Now," Julian said, his voice devoid of all warmth. Serafina was already inside, sitting in the guest chair, examining her nails. She looked up as Clara entered, a mask of false sympathy on her face. "Clara, I'm so sorry. This is just a tragedy." "Julian, I don't know what happened." Clara began, her voice shaking but firm. "I took that package to the mailroom myself. I logged it. I emailed you. Someone. Julian cut her off, his voice dangerously low. Or something? Like pregnancy brain, Clara? Is that the something?" Clara recoiled as if struck. "How dare you?" "I dare," Julian said, stepping closer, "because I trusted you. I looked like a fool this morning. This firm is now exposed to litigation and ruin, all because my mind-reader secretary was too busy picking out nursery colours to do her one simple job." "That is not true," Clara said, her voice rising. "I have never missed a deadline. I have never failed you. This is a mistake. This is wrong." "It's a failure, Clara. A catastrophic failure," Julian said. He leaned on his desk, the picture of a disappointed, betrayed leader. "Serafina was the one who found the package. Go on, Sarah, tell her." Serafina looked up, her eyes wide with mock sadness. "Clara, I found it this morning, in your desk drawer, under a pile of baby magazines." This was a lie too far, a vicious, unnecessary embellishment. "What?" Clara whispered. She physically staggered back. No, I would never. Someone put it there." "Who, Clara?" Julian laughed, a cold, barking sound. "The mailroom gnome? Serafina? Me? Do you hear how paranoid you sound? You're hormonal, you're forgetful, and you just cost this company its biggest deal of the decade." He circled his desk and stood over her. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. "I can't have unreliable people on my team," he said. "The partnership is expanding. We're moving into Asia. I need sharks. Clara, not this." He gestured vaguely at her stomach. Clara's eyes, which had been wide with shock, suddenly narrowed. The fear vanished, replaced by that same cold, calculating calm Mary had seen before. "Julian," she said, her voice quiet, "you are making a terrible mistake." "No," he said. "My mistake was not doing this months ago. You're fired, Clara, effective immediately." "Julian, you can't," Serafina said, playing her part. "I can and I am," Julian snapped. "Performance. Gross negligence. I have more than cause. Security is on their way up." The entire office was watching through the glass walls. They could hear the raised voices. Mary had her hand over her mouth. "You're firing me," Clara stated, not a question. "Because of a package you know I sent. You're firing me, 6 months pregnant, to give my desk to your mistress." The air left the room. Julian's face went from angry to purple. Serafina shot to her feet. "How dare you!" Serafina shrieked. "Shut up, Serafina," Clara said, her voice cutting through the air like a razor. She never broke eye contact with Julian. "You will regret this, Julian Vance. You will regret this more than any other decision in your short, pathetic life." "Get her out," Julian choked out, pressing the security button on his phone. 2 uniformed guards arrived. "Mr. Vance?" "Ms. Hayes is no longer an employee. Please escort her from the building." The guards looked uncomfortable. Escorting a visibly pregnant woman out was a new low. "Ma'am, if you'll come with us." Clara didn't look at them. She looked only at Julian. She let the silence stretch, imprinting his furious, triumphant face into her memory. Then she turned, with all the dignity she could muster, and walked out of the glass office. The guards followed. Someone had already brought a cardboard box to her desk. She didn't have much. A framed photo, a coffee mug, a small plant. Mary rushed over, tears in her eyes. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I know you didn't." "It's all right, Mary," Clara said, her voice soft now. "It's not your fault." She placed her few items in the box. As she did, her sleeve rode up, revealing a simple, elegant watch. It wasn't a Rolex or a Patek. It was a vintage Cartier, understated, but worth more than Julian's entire collection. No one noticed. She picked up the box. The entire floor was silent, watching her walk of shame to the elevators. Serafina was standing in the doorway of Julian's office, a triumphant smirk on her face. Clara passed her and paused. "You know," Clara whispered, just for Serafina. "The camera in the 50th floor hallway. It has a surprisingly clear view of the mailroom. You should really fix your hair before you commit a felony next time." Serafina's face turned to chalk. Clara smiled just once and walked to the elevator. The doors opened. She stepped inside, box in hand, and as the door slid shut, she allowed herself one single shaky breath. Then she pulled out her phone. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call her husband. She hit a number on her speed dial. "Dad," she said, as the elevator began its descent. "It's done. He did it. He fired me." A deep, kind voice rumbled on the other end. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" "I'm fine, Dad. But Vanguard Equity is not. The rot is worse than we thought." "I'll be there in an hour," the voice said. "It's time I came out of retirement." Clara didn't live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment. She lived in a sprawling, 5-story brownstone on the Upper East Side, a fortress of old money and quiet elegance. The doorman, a kind man named Patrick, who had known her since she was a girl, rushed to take her box. "Miss Hayes," he said, his face creased with worry. "You're home early. Is everything all right?" "Everything is precisely as it should be, Patrick," Clara said, managing a smile. "Is my father here?" "Mr. Hayes is in the library, Mum. He's been waiting for you." She walked past the soaring ceilings and the original Rothko paintings in the foyer, her heels clicking on the marble. She entered the library, a room panelled in dark mahogany and smelling of old books and leather. Harrison Hayes stood by the window, looking out over the private garden. He was a man in his late 60s, but he radiated an energy that shamed men half his age. He wasn't tall, but he was broad, with a full head of white hair and eyes so blue they seemed to bore through steel. This was the man who had built Vanguard Equity Partners from nothing, a legendary, almost mythical figure on Wall Street. The press called him the Architect. For the last 5 years he had been happily retired, leaving the day-to-day to his hand-picked successor, David Morrison. He turned as she entered. "Clara." He enveloped her in a hug, his hand going to her belly. "And how is my grandchild?" "He's kicking," Clara smiled, leaning into him. "He's as indignant as I am." "He has my blood, after all," Harrison chuckled. He led her to a deep leather armchair and poured her a glass of water. "Tell me everything. From the top." Clara recounted the entire sordid affair. The Henderson call, the missed package, the lies, Serafina, the public humiliation. Harrison listened, his face impassive. He was a man who listened for a living, and his stillness was more terrifying than any rage. "He used the phrase, 'pregnancy brain'?" Harrison asked, his voice soft. "He did, and then he gestured to my stomach and said, 'I need sharks, not this.'" Harrison closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the blue had turned to ice. "Julian Vance, I remember him. Wharton, same as you. Top of his class. I thought he was hungry. I didn't realize he was depraved." This had all been Clara's idea. A year ago, she had been a rising star at a rival firm, already a junior partner. But she'd been hearing things about her father's company. Rumors, whispers of a toxic Shark Tank culture that had taken root since his retirement. Talk of bullying, of shady accounting, of good people being pushed out. "It's my legacy, Dad," she had told him. "It's our name on the building. I won't let it be rotted from the inside." She'd had one condition. She would go in with her mother's maiden name, Hayes. No one would know who she was. She'd start as a floater, learn the systems, and find the source of the rot. Her father had argued, but she was as stubborn as he was. Her credentials were so good, she was placed as Julian Vance's secretary within a month. His reputation as a difficult manager was legendary, and no one else would take the job. "I thought he was just an arrogant bully, Dad," Clara said, sipping her water. "But this is criminal. Serafina Croft and he, they're stealing." "Stealing?" Harrison sat up. "You have proof?" "More than proof," Clara said. She walked to the desk and pulled out a slim, encrypted flash drive. "Julian thought I was reading baby magazines. I was running forensic accounting on his discretionary marketing funds, the ones he directs to Serafina." She plugged the drive into a laptop. "Serafina isn't just his mistress. She's his launderer. 3 months ago, she incorporated a shell company, Croft Media Solutions. Since then, Julian has approved over $4 million in consulting fees to this company. The invoices are for market synergy analysis and brand strategy. They're boilerplate nonsense." She pulled up another file. "Here are the bank transfers from Croft Media Solutions to an offshore account in the Caymans, an account held by a holding company. And guess who the sole director of that holding company is?" "Julian Vance," Harrison finished, his voice grim. "He wasn't firing me because I'm pregnant," Clara said, the pieces clicking into place. "He was firing me because I was there. I was the one who processed his expense reports. I was the one who saw the invoices. He and Serafina, they thought I was just a dumb, pregnant secretary. They got sloppy. They were afraid I was getting too close." "The North Star package," Harrison said. "It wasn't just to get you fired. It was a distraction, a big, messy, public execution to draw everyone's attention away from the real crime." "Exactly. And they used my pregnancy as the perfect, believable excuse for my incompetence." Harrison stood and walked back to the window. The silence in the room was heavy. "David Morrison," Harrison finally said. "He's a good man, but he's blind. He wants to see the best in people. He let this happen." "What do we do now?" Clara asked. Harrison turned. The kindness was gone from his face, replaced by the cool, lethal focus of the architect. "Now? Now we remind them whose name is on the building." He picked up his phone. "Robert, get the jet ready. We're going to the office. And call an emergency meeting of the entire board of directors. Tell them Harrison Hayes is back." He looked at his daughter, a fierce pride in his eyes. "And Clara, it's time for you to change out of your secretary's uniform. You're going to need your Wharton suit for this." Julian Vance felt like a king. He had slept the sleep of the victorious. The North Star deal was a disaster, yes, but he had already spun it. He had spent all of Friday afternoon in crisis meetings with David Morrison, the CEO. "David, I am shattered," Julian had said, a masterpiece of feigned grief. "I trusted her. I think I was too sensitive to her condition. I didn't want to add to her stress, so I wasn't as vigilant. I blame myself." Morrison, a man who valued empathy, had bought it. "It's a terrible lapse, Julian, but you're right. The timing, it's a mess. Don't worry. Our lawyers will handle the fallout. You just focus on the partnership. We need your leadership." The partnership. It was still his. He had cut the liability, and he was being rewarded for it. Now it was Monday morning. He walked into the lobby of the Vanguard Tower, his $3,000 leather shoes clicking on the granite. He nodded curtly to the security guard, his mind on Serafina, who was already upstairs. She had officially moved her things to Clara's old desk, right outside his glass cube. Everything was in its right place. The elevator was packed with junior analysts, all of whom went silent when he stepped in. He was a god to them. Terrifying, but a god. When he stepped out onto the 50th floor, however, the atmosphere was wrong. It wasn't the usual Monday morning hustle. It was silent, tense. Mary, the older assistant, was at her desk, her eyes red. When she saw Julian, she gave him a look of such pure, unadulterated contempt that it actually made him pause. "Good morning, Mary," he said. Mary just turned back to her screen. He shrugged it off. He walked toward his office. Serafina was not at her new desk. Strange. Then he saw it. An email flagged, urgent mandatory, had arrived at 8:01 a.m. Subject, Emergency Board and Senior Partner Meeting, 9 UAS a.m. Location, the Founders Boardroom, 52nd floor. Attendance, mandatory, no exceptions. Julian's heart gave a little thrill. This was it. The North Star fallout was over, and this was his promotion. They were gathering the partners to announce him. They were probably fast-tracking it to show the firm was stable, moving forward. He checked his reflection in the glass, straightened his Brioni tie. He was ready. He took the private executive elevator to the 52nd floor. This floor was for board meetings only. It was quiet, opulent, and smelled of old money and furniture polish. He pushed open the massive oak double doors to the founder's boardroom and stopped dead. The room was full. The entire executive board, all 12 members, were seated. David Morrison, the CEO, was there, looking pale and nervous, not at the head of the table but on the side. At the head of the table, in the high-backed chair that had sat empty for 5 years, was Harrison Hayes. Julian's blood turned to ice water. He had never met Harrison Hayes. He had only seen the oil portrait of him in the lobby. The man in the portrait was smiling. The man at the table was not. "Mr. Vance," Harrison said, his voice quiet but echoing in the cavernous room. "You're late. Take a seat." Julian's legs felt like lead. He fumbled into the only empty chair. It was at the far end of the table, opposite Harrison. He felt like he was being judged from a mile away. "Where is Serafina Croft?" Julian managed to ask. "Ms. Croft is indisposed," Harrison said. "She's with our head of security and our internal audit team. It seems there are some irregularities in her marketing budget. But we'll get to that." Julian's mouth went dry. This was not a promotion. "I have been retired for 5 years," Harrison began, his eyes sweeping the table, landing on every single board member. "I left this firm, Vanguard, in your hands. I trusted you to maintain the culture I built, a culture of integrity, of diligence, and of respect." He steepled his fingers, his icy blue gaze finally landing and staying on Julian. "Instead, I find a culture of bullying, of theft, and of staggering incompetence. Mr. Morrison, you were CEO. How did this happen?" David Morrison looked like he was going to be sick. "Harrison, I had no idea. The internal reports, Harrison cut him off, were doctored. The profits from Mr. Vance's division, for example, have been exaggerated. His successes, it seems, were not his own." Julian gripped the arms of his chair. "Mr. Hayes, I don't know what you've been told, but my division is the most profitable in the firm. The Henderson call just last week." "Ah, yes. The Henderson call," Harrison said, a thin smile playing on his lips. "The one you brilliantly saved. A call where you miscalculated a client's exposure by 15%, and your secretary had to slide you the answer." Julian was speechless. "How? How do you—" "I know," Harrison said, "because my head of internal review told me. You see, I've had someone on the inside for the last 8 months. Someone I trust implicitly. Someone with a Wharton MBA, a background in forensic accounting, and a vested interest in this company's good name." Harrison nodded to the double doors. "You can come in now." The doors opened. In walked Clara Hayes. She was not the Clara he knew. The mousy brown hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. The drab maternity blouses were gone, replaced by a dark navy blue Armani pantsuit, custom-tailored to accommodate her pregnancy. She wore her power as comfortably as he wore his arrogance. She looked, Julian realized with a jolt of pure terror, exactly like the man at the other end of the table. She was not carrying a box. She was carrying a leather-bound portfolio. "Clara," Julian breathed, his voice a dry rasp. The rest of the board was staring, their minds scrambling to connect the dots. "That's Ms. Hayes Donovan to you, Mr. Vance," Clara said, her voice clear and cold. She took a seat at the table, to the right of her father. "Clara Hayes Donovan, daughter of Harrison Hayes, and as of 8 a.m. this morning, the new Chief Operating Officer of Vanguard Equity Partners." David Morrison lunged forward. "Harrison, this is my daughter, David," Harrison snapped, "and she is the only person in this room who has done her job. Please, Clara, proceed." Clara opened her portfolio. "Good morning, gentlemen. For the last 8 months, I have been working as an executive assistant to Mr. Vance. My father and I were concerned about the cultural rot that was eroding this firm's foundation. We were right to be." She looked directly at Julian. Her eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were diagnostic. "Mr. Vance," she began, "on Friday, you fired me for gross negligence, specifically for failing to courier the North Star acquisition documents." You didn't send them," Julian stammered, falling back on his lie. "You left them in your desk. Serafina found them." "No," Clara said flatly. "I did not. On Wednesday at 4:51 p.m., I personally logged the package and placed it in the mailroom's secure bin. At 5:37 p.m., she nodded to a man in the corner who dimmed the lights and turned on the large projector screen. Ms. Serafina Croft entered the mailroom. The screen lit up with grainy, time-stamped security footage. Serafina clear as day, distracting the clerk and stealing the red envelope. A collective gasp went around the room. At 7:14 p.m., Clara continued, as the footage changed. Ms. Croft and Mr. Vance are seen entering his office. At 7:19 p.m., Ms. Croft is seen logging into my terminal, using my credentials. She proceeds to delete my confirmation email and the courier appointment. The video was silent, but the implications were deafening. Julian was white. And at 7:21 p.m., Clara said, her voice dropping, Mr. Vance is seen taking the North Star package and placing it inside my desk drawer. The video showed him do it. The board turned as one to stare at him. You, Julian sputtered. "You set me up." "No, Julian," Clara said. "You set yourself up. I was just the secretary. I was just the hormonal, forgetful, pregnant woman. You never, ever thought I'd be a threat. You never thought I mattered. You were so blinded by your own arrogance and your affair that you committed mail fraud and conspiracy right in front of a security camera. But why?" David Morrison asked, his face ashen. Why would you, Julian? Sabotage a $2 billion deal, just to fire a secretary? That, Harrison Hayes said, is the billion-dollar question. Clara looked back at Julian. The look of a cold, satisfied predator was gone from his face. Now it was just the pathetic, sweaty fear of a man trapped. "He didn't fire me because he thought I was incompetent," Clara said to the board. "He fired me because he was terrified I was competent." She clicked to the next slide. It was a complex flowchart of bank accounts. Julian Vance and Seraphina Croft were not just having an affair, Clara announced. They were embezzling. For the last 3 months, Mr. Vance has been approving ghost invoices from a shell marketing company. That company, Croft Media Solutions, was founded by and is solely owned by Ms. Croft. In 90 days, they have siphoned $4.2 million from this firm. She pointed to a line item. This $4.2 million was then wired to a holding company in the Cayman Islands, a holding company named J. Vance Capital. "Ring any bells, Julian?" Julian Vance made a sound, a low, strangled noise. "I processed those invoices," Clara said. "I saw the signatures. You got sloppy, Julian. You thought I was too stupid or too distracted by my condition to notice that you were approving multi-million-dollar invoices on a Friday afternoon without a single line of due diligence. You fired me to stop me from talking. You fabricated the North Star crisis to make my firing so spectacular, so public, that no one would ever believe a word I said. I would just be the crazy, pregnant secretary who cost us all." She stood up, slowly, and walked around the table until she was standing directly behind him. He was frozen, staring at the screen that showed his financial ruin. "You didn't fire me for your mistress, Julian," she whispered, so only he and the man next to him could hear. "You fired me for your greed. You just used my pregnancy as your excuse. You gestured to my child, my son, and called him a liability. You called me this." She moved back to her seat. "Mr. Vance, you are a thief. You are a conspirator. And worst of all, you are a fool." The heavy oak doors of the founder's boardroom shut with a final, damning click. The silence that fell was heavier than the wood. Harrison Hayes's words, "report," still hung in the air, a guillotine that had just dropped. Julian Vance, a man who had lived his entire life on a diet of adrenaline and other people's fear, was now a statue of pure, waxy terror. The two detectives, businesslike and unimpressed by the bespoke suit and the 52nd floor view, moved to his chair. "Mr. Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, and embezzlement," the taller detective said, his voice a monotone that cut through Julian's paralysis. "Please stand and place your hands behind your back." Julian finally broke. It wasn't a snap. It was a crumble. "No," he whimpered, a sound so pathetic it made the board members physically recoil. "No, wait, you don't understand. It was her. It was Seraphina. She seduced me. She set this all up. She planted the files. It was her idea." Clara, who had remained standing, let out a sound of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Pathetic," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "Even now, even with the cuffs literally on their way to your wrists, you cannot take responsibility for a single one of your actions. You blame the woman you were sleeping with. You blame the woman you fired. You are a black hole of a man, Julian. Nothing is ever your fault." As the cold steel clicked shut around his wrists, Julian's terror-fueled denial finally cracked, revealing the raw, venomous hatred beneath. He surged to his feet, a snarling, cornered animal. "You!" he spat at Clara, his face purple. "A secretary. You set me up. This was all you." "I did my job, Julian," Clara said, her voice impossibly calm. "The one I was hired for, the one you paid me for. You just never bothered to ask what it was. You thought I was there to fetch your coffee. I was there to protect my family's name." Marcus Thorne, a senior partner and Julian's primary ally on the board, finally found his voice. "Harrison, this is madness," he sputtered, standing up. "Arresting a senior VP in the boardroom? The PR fallout. This is precipitous. We need to handle this internally." Harrison Hayes didn't even turn his head. "Sit down, Marcus," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You're embarrassed because you backed the wrong horse. You're part of the internal problem I'm handling." He nodded to the detectives. "Get him out of my sight." The detectives began to pull Julian toward the door. As he passed Clara, he lunged, his cuffed hands straining. "You'll run this company into the ground, you sentimental bitch. This place needs sharks, and you're just weak." Clara didn't flinch. She stood her ground, forcing the detectives to yank him back. She looked him dead in the eye, her gaze a surgeon's scalpel. "My sentiment, Julian, is the one variable your arrogant mind never accounted for. My sentiment is for the 4,000 employees whose futures you gambled with. My sentiment is for the name my father built. You only accounted for your wallet. Enjoy your new accommodations. I hear the views are terrible." His shriek of rage was cut off as the doors closed behind him. The room exhaled. Harrison Hayes let the silence stretch for a beat before he spoke. "As for Ms. Croft," he said, "she is in a conference room on the 40th floor with our audit team and her own lawyer. Faced with the video evidence, she has already provided a full confession, attempting, like Mr. Vance, to pin the entire scheme on him. It won't work. She will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." He then turned his gaze, which had lost none of its icy fire, on the remaining men. "And now, to the board." His eyes landed on David Morrison. The CEO looked 60 seconds from a heart attack. "David," Harrison said, and the use of his first name was a judgment in itself. "You are a good man. You are a kind man. You are not a leader. You let this infection fester in my company because you were too afraid to ask hard questions. You valued stability over integrity, and in doing so, you nearly cost us both." Morrison stood, his hands shaking. "Harrison, I am so sorry. Clara, Ms. Hayes Donovan, I had no idea. I am terribly, terribly sorry for what he did to you." Clara cut him off, not with malice, but with precision. "David, your job wasn't to have an idea. It was to know. You were the custodian of this firm, and you let the wolves into the nursery. Your apology is noted. Your resignation is accepted. You will leave with your full pension, but you will sign an NDA that ensures you never speak the name Vanguard again." Morrison nodded, utterly broken, and walked out of the room. "Marcus," Harrison said, turning to the last dissenter, "you backed him. You championed his shark mentality. You're out. Clean your desk." "You can't do this," Marcus blustered. "I can," Harrison said. "This entire board is dissolved, effective immediately. It will be reconstituted under the new COO's direction by the end of the day. You can leave on your own, or you can follow Mr. Vance in cuffs for aiding and abetting. Your choice." Marcus Thorne, his face pale, fled the room. Finally they were alone. Just Harrison and Clara in the vast, silent boardroom. The morning sun streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Harrison let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 5 years. "Well, Madam Coe," he said, a weary pride in his voice, "your first day has been eventful." Clara walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city 52 floors below. The same view Julian had prized. "He wasn't the only rot, Dad," she said quietly. "He was just the loudest. The culture here, it's broken. It's what you always taught me not to be." Harrison came to stand beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. "I know," he said, his voice thick with a rare emotion. I let it get away from me. I was so busy building the machine, I forgot about the people inside it. I was so afraid of being done, of being irrelevant in retirement. I let profit become a substitute for purpose. He turned to her, his blue eyes searching hers. That's why you are the new COO, not me. I'm going back into retirement, for real this time. This is your firm now, Clara. Fix it. Clara put her hand over his, her other hand resting on her belly. I'm scared, Dad. It's so broken. And with the baby. Your pregnancy isn't a liability, Clara, he said fiercely, echoing her earlier words. It's a perspective. It's your greatest asset. You're not just building for the next quarter. You're building for the next generation. That's what I lost. That's what you'll bring back. Now, shall we go reintroduce you to your new team? They walked together to the 50th floor. The atmosphere was a funeral. The entire floor was frozen, watching them. They saw Julian's glass cube, now empty. They saw security guards boxing up Serafina's things from Clara's old desk. Clara walked to the center of the floor. Everyone stared, whispering. Mary, Clara called out. Mary at her desk looked up, her eyes wide with terror. She thought she was next. She slowly approached. Clara. Ms. Hayes. Ms. Hayes, Donovan. Clara smiled, a real, warm smile. Mary. For 8 months, you were the only person on this floor who showed me genuine kindness. You have more integrity in your fingernail than Mr. Vance had in his entire body. You are my new executive administrator. Your title and your pay will reflect your seniority and your value. We start now. Mary's hands flew to her mouth, and she burst into tears of sheer, unadulterated relief. It was the first crack in the ice. That afternoon, Clara held an all-hands, town hall, in the firm's main atrium. She stood in front of 500 employees, her father standing off to the side, a proud observer. She used no microphone. Her voice, trained in Wharton lecture halls, carried. My name is Clara Hayes Donovan, she began. My father, Harrison Hayes, built this firm. For the last 8 months, you knew me as Clara Hayes. On Friday, many of you watched me get fired, humiliated, and escorted from this building. This morning, you watched Mr. Vance get arrested. A nervous murmur went through the crowd. The era of Vanguard as a shark tank is over, she declared. Sharks are lazy, solitary predators. They eat their own. From today, we will be a wolf pack. We are intelligent, we are strategic, we are collaborative, and we protect our own. This will be a place of integrity first. Profit second, because integrity, in the long run, is profit. She laid out her new vision. The rot stops today. I am firing every manager in this firm with a credible HR complaint of bullying or harassment. Their positions will be filled from within. And my first act as COO, she paused, her hand going to her stomach, is to announce the new Vanguard parental leave policy. 6 months, fully paid, for all employees, mothers, fathers, and adoptive parents, because family is not a liability. It is our foundation. A stunned silence. Then, led by Mary, a slow, building wave of applause that became a roar. The next 6 months were a war. The sharks she fired didn't go quietly. Marcus Thorne's allies tried to sue for wrongful termination. Clara countered, in person, with the meticulous evidence of their complicity and incompetence she had gathered as a secretary. Forbes magazine ran a scathing article titled, "The Heiress's Hobby. Can a Pregnant Idealist Run a Wall Street Firm?" Clara's response was to write a fiery op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, titled, "Yes, she can, and she's doing it." It went viral. She was vilified on financial TV as sentimental and naive. then praised by a new generation as a visionary. The firm's best and brightest, who had been suffocating under the old guard, flocked to her. Profits dipped for 1 quarter, then soared, driven by a new, massive, green energy fund she had personally championed. The legal reckoning was absolute. Serafina Croft, faced with the video and her own paper trail, folded completely. She testified against Julian, detailing his greed and his paranoia. She received 2 years in a low-security federal prison. Julian, blinded by his own narcissism, made the fatal mistake of refusing a plea deal. He was convinced he could charm a jury. The trial was a circus. He painted himself as a visionary, betrayed by a spurned lover and a conniving secretary. But the prosecution had Clara's meticulous notes, the high-definition security footage, and the bank transfers. The jury convicted him on all counts in under 45 minutes. At his sentencing, the judge, a woman in her 60s, looked down at him with contempt. "Mr. Vance," she said, "you are a man of profound arrogance and a complete lack of character. Your crimes were not of passion, but of a cold, calculated greed. But what the court finds most appalling is your cruel and unusual humiliation of an employee in a vulnerable condition. You used a woman's pregnancy as a weapon. You are, in short, a bully. You are sentenced to 8 years in a state penitentiary." He screamed, a high, thin sound of disbelief as he was led away. 8 months after the boardroom coup, the 50th floor was unrecognizable. It was bright. The glass cube of Julian's office had been dismantled, replaced by a large, open-plan collaborative workspace. People were talking, laughing, arguing over whiteboards. Clara sat in her new office, a warmer space with comfortable chairs, on the same floor as her team. She was on a conference call, finalizing the acquisition of a tech startup. Her desk was covered in reports, but also a small, silver-framed sonogram. She was in mid-sentence when she stopped, her breath catching. She smiled, a small, tired but triumphant smile. Mary, now her unflappable chief of staff, noticed immediately. "Ms. Hayes." It is," Clara breathed, closing her laptop. "Call my husband, and tell the Tokyo board. The call will have to be rescheduled for tomorrow morning. My son has decided on an earlier-than-expected arrival." Harrison Hayes met her at the elevator, holding a brand-new baby carrier, beaming. "Ready, Madam Coe?" "More than ready, Dad," she said, squeezing his arm. As the elevator doors closed, the floor didn't panic. They didn't whisper. They stood, and they applauded their leader. Clara Hayes Donovan had built a company that could run without her for a few hours, or a few months. The new foundation was strong. It wasn't built on fear. It was built on trust. What a story of karma and consequences. It just goes to show that you never, ever know who you're talking to. Julian's arrogance and cruelty weren't just his moral failing. They were his financial ruin. He saw a pregnant secretary as a weak, disposable problem, but he was actually abusing the most powerful person in the building. Clara proved that true strength isn't about yelling, bullying, or wearing an expensive suit. It's about intelligence, patience, and knowing exactly when to make your move. She didn't just get revenge. She rebuilt an entire company in her own, stronger image. What did you think of Julian's takedown? Was it satisfying? Let me know in the comments what your favorite part of the story was. If you loved this story, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see justice served, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss another real-life drama. We have new stories coming every week. Thanks for listening.